But it is just coming up on 7:30, which means, of course, it's time to talk to John Giles. Evening, John.
Evening, Nathan.
Happy New Year.
And you, Nathan. And all your listeners.
It's been a busy old week. Off the pitch as much as on the pitch. There's been some cracking games, but there's been no shortage of talking points, particularly around Chelsea and Manchester United. Romelu Lukaku gave this interview 3 weeks ago where he spoke in glowing terms of Inter Milan and how he never should have left, and his unhappiness at Thomas Tuchel's system that wasn't exactly what he wanted. It blew up massively. Lukaku ends up dropped for the game against Liverpool, but he's back in, started last night. What did you make of how Thomas Tuchel handled it all?
I thought he handled it very well, Nathan. I thought it was a very, very difficult situation for him because apparently the players needed permission from the manager to do articles, and he didn't. Lukaku didn't get any license to do that. So I think he was caught unawares. I think it was an interview he did about 3 weeks ago, Nathan, Lukaku, when he wasn't in the team and obviously wasn't very, very happy. But since then he got into the team and he scored goals. But I think what he did was very, very silly, giving an interview to somebody in Italy. As we know, the world today is very, very small. It's not going to stay in Italy, and it didn't, and got him into big trouble. But he was a very, very silly lad. But as far as Tuchel was concerned, I think he handled it well, Nathan.
Tuchel seemed to realise very early on that while it was a big story, he didn't want to further fan the flames at any stage. He always got the sense he wanted to offer Lukaku a route back in, that he understood that while Lukaku had probably been a little bit stupid in what he had said, it wasn't that dire a situation.
No, I think what happened, reading about it afterwards, and I think the fans in Italy when he left, when Lukaku left, they were very upset and annoyed about him, and I think he was trying to get back on side with the fans there, to say he wanted to get back and all the various things that he said, but it obviously didn't go down well with the Chelsea supporters, and particularly the manager. But I think he sorted it out well. He played him last night. So I'd say he did apologise, Lukaku. So I'd say that would be the end of it now.
For the sake of the dressing room, did he have to drop him for the game against Liverpool?
I would say so. I mean, if somebody does what he did, then it's very, very bad for the morale of the squad, Nathan. And if you put him straight in, the lads who were playing in the team say, well, anything goes here, whereas it showed he was disciplined them, but then sorted it out and got him back for the next match. So I think it's all said and done now. But I think he handled it well.
That game against Liverpool was one of the games of the season, if not the game of the season so far. It was a sensational watch, end to end. Countless chances. What were your overall thoughts on it? The general consensus seemed to be that Chelsea were probably the better team over the 90 minutes?
Probably by the end of it, Nathan. No, Liverpool, as we know, got off a very, very good start. But it did show the morale of the Chelsea players to come back like they did. Two against Liverpool is a big deficit early on. But they played extremely well, showed the right spirit, because a lot of teams can give up at that particular stage, particularly against Liverpool, but they didn't. They stayed in there, got the 2 goals back, and might have won it in the end.
Kovacic scored a wonder goal for Chelsea. He's generally overshadowed in that Chelsea midfield by N'Golo Kante and Jorginho. What's your sense of Kovacic as a player?
I like him, Nathan. I think he's a very good player. He's good skill. He's not spectacular, but he gets the job done well. He gets a tackle in. He doesn't score many goals. It was a brilliant goal he scored the other day. But he's a good all-round player, and I think it's typical of the Chelsea squad. They've got an awful lot of good players in there. And it's just a question of getting it sorted out, especially up front, as to what is the best format up there, to get the goals. But overall, they did well to come back into a match against Liverpool.
It does seem as though Tuchel is going to continue to rotate his front players, his front two, his front three, his front four, whatever way it is that they're lining up, that we're not going to see a settled starting attack for Chelsea. Is that going to make it difficult constantly for whoever those attackers are to get any sort of cohesion?
Yeah, it could be better, Nathan. I think at this stage now they should have, a top two. If Lukaku's going to be the top one, then there should be actually somebody in there now who's outstanding to be playing alongside Lukaku, and they don't really have that. They've got a lot of talented players there. Werner's been a big disappointment. You would imagine that Lukaku and Werner be the top two there, but he hasn't been doing his stuff. And Mount is good. They've got some very, very good players there, Nathan, but none of them outstanding enough that you could say he should be in every week. They're not really doing it up front as much as they should be doing.
Antonio Rudiger at centre half looks set to leave during the summer on a free transfer and has been linked with a huge money move to Real Madrid. He's, for a lot of people, maybe the outstanding defender in the Premier League this season. How do you rate him?
I wouldn't put him as outstanding defender, Nathan, at all. I think he's very, very good. I think he's a big bully, to be quite honest. He gets into trouble all the time. Well, he gets out of trouble as well. Now, I think I think people over the last few have quite honest, overrated him. Nathan, I don't think he's that good. He's a very good player, but if you look at the player he's playing beside, he's Silva. He's a class player.
Yeah.
You got Van Dijk, you got Maguire at his best. He's good. He's a good player, but no more than that. But I think he's a big bully. He wouldn't be one of my favourite players. Let's put it that way. Watching him play. You saw the match against Leeds a couple of weeks ago. There was an incident near after the 90 minutes, and he's not involved in it. And he goes right 60 yards to get over to get into the middle of it. So he wouldn't be my favourite player, but he's okay.
Yeah. What about Liverpool then? 2-0 up away from home, but it felt like the Liverpool of maybe 18 months, maybe even 2-3 years ago at this stage, where, as you used to say, go, go, go. There was no real control to the performance.
No, they're playing this high line, Nathan, that they've been playing for the last 12 months. And it leaves them very, very, first, top-class defenders. But there again, I don't think Van Dijk is playing as well, Nathan. I don't think he's really got over it. He got the virus, didn't he, a while ago? And I don't think he's got over it. He looks a bit sluggish to me by his normal self. And, if he's not playing as well as he can, then they're going to lose goals. But I think it's mostly the high line, which is an offside. In my day, it was the offside trap. And I think with the players they have, there's no need to do it. If you look at the Chelsea second goal the other day, there was a couple of good passes, and the players threw on the goal. They're not defending. It's all or nothing. It's when you're playing the offside line, or the high line, it's touch and go, Nathan, whether it goes for you or against you. And with the players they have, I don't think they've any need to do that.
All our football coverage on Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. Don't miss Chelsea against Tottenham in the Women's Super League on Friday. It's live only on Sky Sports. Might talk about Manchester United, John, because on and off the pitch it's really hard to get a grip with what's happening at the moment. While the scoreline against Wolves may not quite have been as extreme as a couple of the results at the end of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's time, performance-wise it felt as though it was just as poor. And over the last couple of days there's been any amount of stories coming out that there's up to 17 players unhappy at the club that want to leave. They haven't been impressed with Ralf Rangnick. They think they're spending too much time in training on what they do off the ball rather than on the ball. Rangnick itself, it seems, is unhappy with the amount of players in the squad. He feels it's quite bloated, that there's 28, 29 players around on the training pitch and it's simply too many. It already feels that the Rangnick era is over before it's begun.
Well, it hasn't been a good start, Nathan. Now, when he made the comments when he first went there, I thought, well, yeah, that's good. He's making sense in that. But, recent performances, which is what you really look at, haven't been good. And they were particularly poor against Wolves the other night. There's no doubt about that. You could say, well, you could see that players don't really know what to do. They look confused to me, Shaw came out today, made comments about, the dressing room is not good and they seem to be confused. Doesn't seem to be a good spirit in there. So it's very difficult to know, but you can only judge what happens on the pitch. And I've read the papers like everybody else recently, and he has a psychologist gone in there. Sasha Lentz is the name, and he's made peculiar statements about him and what he's going to be very important to him in this time to get everything that needs to be done with the players. But I found in football, my experience in football, the manager, Nathan, is a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist.
Yeah.
With players, it's football. You're in the dressing room. Usually, the manager, people say, football is a simple game. I don't think it is a simple game. I think it's a very complicated game. And what the best managers do in football, they reduce it to simplicity, Nathan. In other words, it's not complicated. And I just find with Rangnick now, it seems to be complicated. And there's, like you saw Shaw coming out the other day saying, what he was saying, in fact, is we really don't know what we're doing. And he's saying, well, I'm going to get this psychologist in, and that'll be a help to the players. It doesn't make sense to me in football terms, Nathan. When the manager's doing this stuff, he tells the players what he wants. He makes it clear to them. And I don't think this is happening. You see, the great thing about football now, it manifests itself on the pitch. What's the manager doing? We see when Conte has gone to Spurs, you can see the difference in them. Not so good the other night, but the difference in them, that he's getting to them and he wants them to do certain things and they're doing it. And it's as far as he said, he's making it simple for the players. This doesn't seem to be the case with United. It just doesn't, and I don't think it's certainly not promising at the moment.
Do we need to show a bit more patience with Ralf Rangnick? It had got to a pretty low level under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and it felt as though Manchester United needed a dramatic change. He's coming in, he's trying to implement a completely new system at a time of COVID, at a time of matches every 3-4 days when there's very little time on the training pitch. Is it just a case that he's trying something so radically different for Manchester United that it's not going to be a quick fix, that actually he needs several months, maybe an entire summer, to get his methods across?
No, if you need that long, it can't be right, Nathan. It's again, it comes down to the manager. Football is not a simple game; it's a complicated game, and the manager, with his knowledge, whoever it might be, reduces it to simplicity. So when you see it on the pitch, if we're saying, or he's saying, look, this is more complicated than it looks, or I need more time on it. Of course, he needs a bit of time to see who's the best player in the best position, and he needs a few matches to do that. But what I'm hearing at the moment, it's about the formation, and they don't really know what I want. And that, well, from day one, if the manager's really doing his stuff and is a good manager, the players know what he wants, and then he gets them individually, Nathan. There's no huge secret about how to run a football club or get the best out of the players that have at your disposal if you know what you're doing. And what I see from him at the moment, he's not coming clear to me that he knows what he's doing. Or the players don't know what he wants, and that shouldn't be the case. Of course, it takes a little bit of time to implement what you want the players to do, but they should understand from day one what you mean by what you want from the players. And what it's looking to me is the players are saying, I know what he's saying, but I don't really know what he wants. So they seem to be confused. But great coaches don't confuse players, Nathan. They make it clear to them what they want, and then over the period of time, they get better and better at doing what the manager wants them to do. But they're clear of what they do, what's needed to be done.
At some stage, do the players need to look at themselves and take some responsibility. Like, that Manchester United squad is one of the most expensively assembled in the history of football. You're looking at Harry Maguire, 80 million. Rafa Varane, with all the success he's had coming in during the summer. Bruno Fernandes, 70 million. Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the greatest players of all time. Rashford and Greenwood, two of the most exciting young English talents of their generation. Surely, at some stage, you shut the doors of the dressing room, you look around the dressing room and realise that there's enough talent there, if the will and the attitude is right, to win games and to perform better than they did against Wolves, regardless of who the manager is.
Well, that's quite right in many ways, Nathan, except for your last remark. No matter who the manager is, like, the manager dictates what formation they're going to play, despite the fact of the ability of the players. What I'd like to say there, you could get 12 great players in the club and a terrible manager, and Nathan, it wouldn't take him long to ruin what's needed to be done.
But I guess the problem with Manchester United is, and I think back to Roy Keane's comments, it must be 18 months ago now, when Manchester United lost the match, and he said these players are going to get Ole Gunnar Solskjaer sacked, that regardless of who goes in, whether it's Maurizio Pochettino and Antonio Conte or Ralf Rangnick, that there's something within that dressing room at the moment that's a little bit toxic, that it feels as though it's almost impossible to fix. Well,
first of all, I'll go back to Roy Keane's comment. I wouldn't pick up what he said there. I mean, when Solskjaer was there, Nathan, what was it that Roy Keane said again?
That the players will get Solskjaer sacked.
Yes. No, Solskjaer got himself sacked, Nathan. He had the players with ability there, but he wasn't a good enough manager, a good enough coach to do what needs to be done. No matter how good the players you have at your disposal, you still have to organise them, get in their heads, get them on the pitch, make them into a team, make them a bit scared of you, and all that. Solskjaer never had that. He never had that coming into the club, Nathan. That's where they made the big mistake. Solskjaer never got a grip of those players. I don't think they had any real respect for him because he wasn't good enough to do what needed to be done. He just wasn't. He was a boy trying to do a man's job. I mean, if you go back to Conte doing his stuff at Spurs, I know they didn't win the other night, but you can see from the day he's come in, this fella is really doing the job. He's improving them on the pitch, and the great thing about football is what you see on the pitch is an improvement. In Solskjaer's case, he had a lot of not experienced players, talented players. Some days they were okay, some days they weren't okay. There was an inconsistency about him because he wasn't really telling them anything. Now, with this fella's coming in, I think he is telling them things, but he's not telling them the correct things, Nathan. So therefore, the players, you won't get the players in the dressing room know very, very quickly what's going on here, and you can see it and manifests itself on the pitch. And the performance against Wolves the other night, like he was talking about this formation, and I hear people talking about it's not the formation, it's what the players are doing, and they didn't look. They looked to me the other night. They didn't know what they were expected to do. So and what the manager's saying now, well, I've got the psychologist in and he can help me get to them. He won't get to them, not the psychologist. In football, the manager or the coach, or whatever we want to call him, who influences a team, is a psychologist. And I don't mean any disrespect to psychologists, and they have their place in the club. But when you've got a group of players that he has, Nathan, again, knowledge equates to simplicity. And when he's talking to those players, it's obvious now in what they're saying. It's not simple, and they're confused. That's what they look like to me. And on the pitch, they looked confused because whatever the managers tell them, it's not the simple things that great managers, reduce it to. That's the problem I would have, and the worry for Manchester United in this particular way.
So the news came through today that Ed Woodward confirming his departure from Manchester United. So maybe things change behind the scenes and there's some better decisions being made. Do you think
sorry, Nathan, the big decision over the last 3 years or 4 years is getting a manager in that's good.
Well, that's what I was about to ask you. Do you think there's a possibility then that within that dressing room and all those very talented players that I just touched upon, I think, and we're playing at Manchester United, one of the biggest, most successful clubs in world football, and our last manager was appointed because he was a former player who had come from Molde in Norway, and our current manager has come from Lokomotiv Moscow, where he was the director of football, has had a couple of seasons managing Leipzig in Germany, and again for a club of their size, we haven't gone out and got the best manager available. We've sort of got a bit of a stopgap. And how can we be expected to perform when that's the case?
Yes, well, they wouldn't be thinking in how we're supposed to perform. They just say, well, he's not what we want. He's not the manager. You see, what's happened to Manchester United, Nathan? They've been badly managed for the last 3 or 4 years. Getting Solskjaer in was a bad move. Whoever is doing it, I don't know who's behind the scene there. But they knew what they were getting in Solskjaer. They didn't want anybody but Solskjaer because he would do what he was told. Now, in the last few months, this is going back 3 or 4 years now, right? And they've made big decisions that Solskjaer hasn't been responsible for. Getting X amount of players in for millions of pounds that I'd say he had nothing to do with. Now they've got a man coming in now because Solskjaer's gone on an interim basis, Nathan. An interim basis sometimes is a disaster for a club because the players now, even with this lad, if he was doing it right, in the players' heads, whether they're conscious of it or not, he's not going to be there next year. So why would he go along with his ideas? I don't agree with his ideas, so therefore I'm not going to go along with his ideas. So I'm not responsible anyway. For next year he's going to be gone, and we'll have somebody else in here. So where's the team spirit? Everybody's looking after themselves now. This is the disaster area that Manchester United have created for themselves. Now, they had a chance to get Conte in, and they didn't take it because they don't want a Conte, because he would insist that this is what we do, and this is the way I want to do it. So it's caught up with them, doing it the way they wanted to do it before Solskjaer, and they got Solskjaer in 3 years or whatever, 4 years, whatever it was, right? Now they've got an interim manager in who can't have the respect of the players unless they give him they know that he's getting the job next year, and they don't know that. So it's a disaster. And players being players, Nathan, I was in the dressing room long. They're not inclined to look after themselves. In other words, how is this affecting me? Like, I'm the centre half, and he wants us to play that way, or we don't know what way he's going to play. So they start looking around and say, well, I need more protection. The midfield players say, well, I need somebody extra in the middle of the field. It becomes chaotic. And I think that's what happened to Manchester United.
Right.
And what I see from this guy, I don't see any evidence that he's going to make it any better at the moment.
We got to leave it there, unfortunately, John. We'll have plenty more to talk about next Thursday. Thanks for joining us as always.
Thanks, Nathan.
Football on Off the Ball
with Sky. Watch Premier League, Women's Super League, EFL, Scottish Premiership and much more live on Sky Sports.
News Talk Breakfast.
On the show, we spoke to Caroline O'Connor and her 11-year-old son DJ, who is making a list of things he wants to do before he loses his sight.
So when we started the bucket list, someone sit back and close their eyes and imagine that you can't see again. What would be the one thing you'd love to do? And obviously we had hundreds of people text us, say, look, can you do this, can you do that? So the list has been made longer.
News Talk Breakfast with Ciara Kelly and Shane Coleman.
In association with AIR.
Weekday mornings at 7 on News Talk.
At Harvey Norman, we've